Worry has this strange way of disguising itself as responsibility. It makes you feel like you're being careful, like you're protecting yourself, but underneath it, it's just fear rehearsing for a future that hasn't even happened yet. And most of the time, it never will. It's wild how much time we spend mentally solving problems that only exist in our imagination, playing out conversations that haven't happened, preparing defenses for situations that don't even exist. You lie in bed staring at the ceiling, building disaster scenarios in your head like it's your part-time job, and you call it being prepared. But worrying doesn't prepare you, it paralyzes you. It locks you into a loop where your nervous system is on high alert, even when there's no real threat. It doesn't make you smarter, calmer, or more in control. It just makes you exhausted. And the moment you step back, even for a second, you realize how much of your mental energy was being drained by thoughts that had no business being there in the first place. You start to notice the pattern. The things you worried about last month, half of them didn't even happen. The ones that did, you handled them. Not because you stressed about them, but because you showed up when it was time. Worry didn't help. Presence did. And here's the most surprising part. When you stop worrying, you don't become careless. You become focused. You stop scattering your energy across infinite what-ifs and start showing up to what is. And that's where everything begins to shift. Not because life magically becomes perfect, but because you're no longer living in a future that's built entirely on fear. The heaviness starts to lift. You stop gripping so tightly. You give yourself permission to breathe again. Not because everything is solved, but because you finally realized you don't need to suffer your way through life just to feel safe. And when that shift happens, when worry loses its grip, that's when everything else starts to align. Most people don't realize it, but worry is just the brain trying to feel useful when it's scared. It's like a faulty survival instinct, constantly scanning for what could go wrong, trying to predict every possible outcome, as if worrying hard enough will somehow keep bad things from happening. But here's the problem. It's an illusion of control. Worry gives you the sensation that you're doing something, thinking, preparing, planning. But in reality, you're just spinning your wheels. You're mentally running laps around a problem you haven't even met yet. And the worst part? While you're busy obsessing over what might go wrong, life is quietly unfolding right in front of you. Opportunities pass you by. Moments slip through your fingers. You miss out on peace, connection, creativity. Not because they aren't there, but because worry makes you blind to them. The real shift happens when you stop asking, what if everything goes wrong? And start asking, what if I'll be okay even if it does? That one question changes everything, because confidence isn't built by avoiding chaos. It's built by moving through it, one grounded breath at a time. It's built by realizing that you can meet discomfort without collapsing, that you can face uncertainty without losing yourself, that you don't need to have all the answers, you just need to stay present enough to hear them when they come. When you stop feeding the worry, you stop needing to predict the path. You learn to respond instead of panic. You trust that whatever comes, you'll show up for it. Not perfectly, not with a flawless plan, but with presence, clarity, and calm. That's when life begins to flow differently. Conversations feel lighter. Decisions feel cleaner. Even mistakes don't hit as hard because you're no longer interpreting every misstep as a sign that things are falling apart. You stop reacting from fear and start acting from peace. And people notice. Your energy shifts. You're no longer broadcasting anxiety in your tone, your eyes, your posture. You move slower, but with more precision. You say less, but with more weight. You stop trying to control every detail and start becoming the kind of person who doesn't need to, because your presence alone carries strength. And that's when things around you begin to change, not because you forced them to, but because you stopped fighting them with worry. Here's something that might sting a little. A lot of the problems you think you have aren't actually problems. They're stories created by worry. You're not always overwhelmed by your situation. You're overwhelmed by your interpretation of it, the meaning you've assigned to it, the future outcomes you've imagined that may never arrive. Worry has a way of turning small things into monsters. A single unread message becomes a sign someone's upset with you. A quiet room becomes proof you're not doing enough. One unexpected event, and suddenly your whole day feels like it's spiraling. But what if you didn't add meaning? What if you didn't jump to conclusions? What if you simply let things be what they are without instantly making them personal, negative, or permanent? This is where life starts to simplify itself. Not because you've gained more control, but because you've stopped coloring everything with fear. One of the most freeing things you can do is stop narrating your life with worry. You don't need to constantly analyze how things will unfold. You don't need to forecast disaster. You don't need to overplan for every possible outcome. In fact, the most powerful people you'll meet often seem oddly calm in the face of chaos, not because they've mastered life, but because they've stopped letting their minds tell a scary story about every unknown. They know the truth. Worry is just the mind trying to write a script it was never meant to control. And ironically, when you stop obsessing over what might happen, you finally have space to focus on what is happening. That's where the growth is. That's where real alignment begins. You start handling things as they come, not as you feared they would be. You make clear decisions because you're not fogged by fear. You take better care of your body because you're not drained by mental chaos. You show up in your relationships differently because you're not stuck in loops of doubt and guilt and what ifs. Worry feeds on imaginary futures, but peace, real peace, lives in the now. And once you begin to feel that kind of peace, even in small doses, you'll start to realize something important. Nothing outside you actually changed. You changed. And the world began responding to that. There's this quiet superpower most people don't even realize they have, and it's the ability to let things be unresolved, to not chase immediate closure, to not have all the answers lined up in a row before moving forward. Because the truth is, life isn't a perfectly scripted movie. It unfolds in layers, in moments, in pauses. And sometimes, the wisest thing you can do is wait, without worry. That's hard to do when your mind's been trained to fill every silence with panic. But once you begin noticing that urge, the urge to fix, to predict, to figure everything out right now, you also gain the ability to pause and question it. Why am I rushing? What am I afraid will happen if I just stay here for a second longer? Who told me that peace only comes after everything is solved? Worry tries to convince you that peace is something you earn after life cooperates. But that's a trap. If you're always waiting for everything to be perfect before you allow yourself to breathe, you'll be holding your breath for the rest of your life. Real peace, the kind that doesn't collapse under pressure, doesn't come from controlling your circumstances. It comes from unhooking your emotional state from them, from choosing presence even when things are uncertain, from learning to sit with life when it's unfinished, unpolished, and unresolved, and still not letting it steal your center. And this is where everything begins to shift. Because once worry loses its grip, you regain access to your energy, your creativity, your sense of direction. Life starts to feel smoother, not because you're lucky, but because you're finally moving with it, not against it. The situations might look the same, but you feel different inside them. More grounded, more clear, less desperate for answers, more open to possibilities. And that's when things start falling into place. Not because you forced them, but because you finally stopped pushing so hard and started trusting your own stillness. Most people never stop to question why their minds are always busy. They just assume it's normal, like that background hum of a machine that's always on. But here's what rarely gets said. A noisy mind isn't a strong mind. It's a mind that's been trained to survive, not to live. We've normalized anxiety as ambition. We've confused restlessness with productivity. And we've come to believe that if we're not constantly thinking, something must be wrong. But overthinking doesn't mean you're evolving. It usually means your nervous system is stuck in overdrive, replaying old fears under new disguises. Here's the truth most people avoid. Worrying makes you feel like you're participating in life, but really, you're just watching your life from the sidelines, micromanaging every possible outcome in your head while the actual moment slips away. You don't experience the beauty of a sunset because your mind is reviewing your to-do list. You don't hear what someone's really saying because your brain is already planning how to respond. You're in the room, but not really there. But the moment you start pulling back from that, not by force, but by awareness, things begin to shift. You start catching yourself mid-worry, and instead of spiraling, you breathe. You remind yourself, this is not happening now. This is a story my mind is writing, and I can close the chapter at any moment. That's when you begin returning to your body. You notice the way your breath moves, how your feet feel on the ground, how your chest loosens just a little when you stop feeding the panic. You begin re-inhabiting your life, not as a character trying to survive the plot, but as the author choosing how each line unfolds. You realize you can't worry your way into a peaceful future, but you can choose peace right now, not as a final destination, but as a repeated decision. And the more you make that choice, the more you build that muscle. The easier it becomes to return to yourself no matter how loud the world gets. One of the most overlooked truths about worrying is this: it's addictive. Not in the way that makes you feel good, but in the way it gives you a strange sense of control. It keeps your mind busy, gives you something to do, something to fixate on, as if the act of worrying itself is productive. But the reality is, most of the time, it's just distraction dressed as responsibility. And that distraction comes with a cost. It pulls you away from joy, not in big dramatic ways, but in tiny quiet ones. You laugh, but your mind's still halfway stuck in a scenario that hasn't happened. You try to enjoy your day, but there's that lingering hum in the background whispering "what if" about things you can't even control. And without realizing it, you've built your whole inner world around preparing for storms that may never come. But here's the shift. When you catch yourself in that spiral, and instead of feeding it, you pause. You start retraining your nervous system. You start showing your body what safety feels like without needing everything to be perfect. You begin realizing that safety isn't something you'll find someday when everything's figured out. It's something you create when you stop treating uncertainty like a threat. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to stop mistaking your thoughts for facts. Just because a fear shows up doesn't mean it's true. Just because a possibility exists doesn't mean it deserves your peace. And this doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring more wisely. You protect your energy like it's sacred because it is. You treat your focus like a limited resource because it is. You stop giving the loudest voice in your head all the attention and instead start listening for the quiet one, the one that says, "It's okay not to know yet. You're safe here, right now." And when you live from that space, something powerful happens. Your intuition gets louder. You begin sensing what's right for you without needing to overthink every detail. You make moves without needing everyone's approval. You let go of timelines and start trusting timing. The world around you won't always slow down, but you will. And in that stillness, you find strength, the kind that doesn't need to be loud to be unshakable. You know what's rare these days? A mind that's quiet, not because everything is perfect, but because it's no longer at war with itself. That kind of peace doesn't come from controlling life. It comes from learning to stop adding weight where it doesn't belong. Because most of what's making your days feel heavy isn't yours to carry. It's the stories, the assumptions, the rehearsed disasters, the made-up conversations, the invisible standards you never agreed to, but still feel pressured to meet. And all of that, it can go. You don't have to solve every problem before you can exhale. You don't have to anticipate every outcome before you allow yourself to rest. You just have to notice when your mind tries to pull you into fear and choose not to follow it every time. This isn't about becoming passive. It's about learning when to stop gripping so tightly. It's about walking through life open, not armored, present, not panicked, because life responds differently when your energy shifts. People feel it. You feel it. And it's not some grand mystical thing. It's just that you're finally showing up as you, not a future version, not an over-calculated version, just the version of you that trusts that whatever happens next, you'll meet it when it arrives, and not a second sooner. And maybe, just maybe, everything starts going well. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because you stopped making it harder than it needed to be. If this message hit at the right moment, like, comment, and subscribe. Not for the algorithm, but to keep your own energy aligned with what actually serves you. You're not here to worry your way through life. You're here to live it. Let's keep doing that together.